First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, and maybe just 2 minutes or less, and then tell us also what's your go be happy place. Why don't you start, Rebecca?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Garcia. Amongst some other things that I do, I'm also a program manager at Microsoft. I co-founded a nonprofit 501c3 here called CoderDojo NYC. We serve about 12,000. We've served about 12,000 youth in the greater New York City area, running free monthly STEM workshops. So I'm very passionate about technology education. My background is as a self-taught programmer, and I wanted to continue expanding and sharing that love of learning. And so I co-founded my nonprofit, and I've been involved in technology education. I manage a program for underserved and underrepresented New Yorkers for them to become IT professionals called Tech Jobs Academy. And I'm really excited to share that not all of us millennials are using Twitter to tweet what we're eating. We're also using it for good. And I think having a lot of these resources and tools now currently have helped me to connect and have so many other opportunities that I didn't have. I don't think I would have had available. And so, yeah, I wanted to share my perspective on how important technology education is, and what types of skills and where millennials are going, and that we are making an impact.
Fantastic. And what's your go be happy place?
My go be happy place, Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Brooklyn Bridge Park. Very nice.
If not in this weather. But yeah, in the summertime, it's beautiful.
Yeah, a good view of the city and everything from there?
Definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. Kevin, tell us about yourself and where's your happy place?
Sure. My name's Kevin Chen. I'm a technical lead at Freddie Mac. I'm also heavily involved in our employee resource groups at the company, both the Asian Affinity Group, ERG, as well as the Rising Leaders Group, which is more geared towards millennial development. Mm-hmm. I've been pretty fortunate with my career so far, my journey so far. I've had out of college exposure to investments in capital markets with pricing various securities, debt derivatives, multi-class, single-class securities, then moved outside of Freddie for a brief stint and worked with the Department of Treasury.
Okay.
As well as the Department of Defense. So they're kind of a shift in kind of the domain area, right? I'm going from a financial services kind of industry to federal. And then within federal, I was working for the Tax and Trade Bureau, so alcohol permits. Completely different than financials, believe me.
I've heard alcohol, weapons, and money.
Yes.
So far.
Not looking too good.
You look like a very mild-mannered dude, but I sense there's a dark side that I don't know about.
I'll go to the better side.
It's like Kevin after dark,
So from there, I did some work with the Department of Defense doing federal telecom acquisition. So again, another shift into a completely different domain area. The federal acquisition regulations, not the funnest things to learn about, but you definitely learn a lot. All the various acronyms around contract vehicles, RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, you name it. And then with my most recent role at Freddie Mac, I'm supporting our legal and compliance divisions. One thing I did want to reflect back on is my first summer internship. I was working for a school system. At the time, all I thought I was doing was shredding paper. So I was tasked with shredding 20, 30 boxes of paper every single day. I didn't think much of it. Hey, I'm getting paid. I have a gigantic shredder in front of me and lots of boxes of paper. So now that I'm working at Freddie Mac within the legal division, you learn a lot about defensible deletion, e-discovery, and most importantly, records management. So then I reflect back, oh wait, I was doing more than shredding paper. I was actually part of the tail end of records management, disposing of records that had met the retention requirements. So it's like, aha, yeah.
You realize you're on the record.
I was doing something meaningful. Back then I was counting how many boxes I could shred a day. Whereas now I'm thinking, man, I saved the school system a lot of money by disposing of paper that was taking up space in a warehouse.
There you go.
Right? So it's kind of a different perspective that you learn as you go.
Well, thanks for that. And what's your go be happy place?
I'll quote, I love that question. I'll quote one of my wedding vows.
Okay.
My wife had promised me every weekend when there's a Marvel or Avengers or superhero movie that comes out, we're going to go watch it.
Nice.
That's my go be happy place
Very
in the
good.
theaters.
Good.
And the main reason is you kind of have to appreciate the level of creativity that goes into developing those characters.
Sure.
One of my favorite characters, Tony Stark, Iron Man.
Of course.
No superpowers, but brilliant,
Totally.
creative, and it kind of gives me that level of inspiration to, if you can think of it, you can do it and make it happen. Right?
I love it. That's great. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, let's give him some applause for that. I hope someone tweets what he just said. I like that. Rebecca, let's talk a little bit. So I kid our millennial friends a lot, mostly because I'm jealous. But why don't you tell me, what do you think, what is the biggest misconception about millennials, would you say?
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is social media. Again, the oversharing, like I don't need to see what everybody ate for lunch. I don't, you're constantly connected, and it feels like, I think some people might think of it as constantly distracted. We're on so many different social media channels, but it's amazing how that has shifted so many things, such as how millennials, hear about the news, how we're shaping media and the news, and it's no longer a culture it's now driven by the consumer. Now companies are starting to listen to what trends are coming from consumers versus coming from, coming down from a company. So I think that's a little bit different, and I think that, going back to what we were saying earlier about tech companies and how some of these companies are just changing the way that we function. I think one really great quote to tie back to, we were talking about Uber and Airbnb and things like that. Back when I was growing up, so this is something I've heard, is when I was growing up, I was taught not to get into a car with strangers. Right. And now I have an app on my phone where I call strangers to come to me to pick me up in their car.
Yeah.
It's totally shifting the economy. It's shifting media culture. And I think that more now than ever, millennials have the sense of ownership and their own voice, and are kind of struggling to figure out how to fit into, as you alluded to, this new economy that's different, where you have to define yourself.
That's really interesting. I agree with you about the sharing economy, because I still know why you would want to rent and go stay in someone else's house when there's a perfectly good hotel chain that will take great care of you, give you great service, 30 brands, around the world. You get rewards points. I don't know why someone would want to even go there. I don't, to some other place on an app. You don't know who's been there. So anyway, I work for Marriott, in case you don't know. How about you, Kevin? Tell me, what do you think, maybe into workspace? What is the biggest misconception about millennials?
There's two that I can think of, and it's been kind of throughout our day today, it's been mentioned a couple of times. One quick thing is work-life balance. So I think in the workplace, it can be misconceived that millennials are hard workers, yes, but then unlimited time to work. So I think in one of the Next Gen studies in the past couple of years, one of the things that keeps millennials on their feet is having the ability to balance out their life outside of work.
Right.
So that's definitely one misconception. There is life outside of work. It's not always 16-hour days sustainable. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that I'm guilty of this. I text my wife from first floor while she's right upstairs. So the kind of communication avenue that millennials use, but not necessarily choose to always use, right? So for things like mentoring and interacting with your management, I wouldn't want to just have an exchange via text, hey, Kevin, you're doing a great job, versus talking to my management in person, right? So it's really, there's the convenience factor, and then there's the kind of personal development aspect where it does make a difference. It's not always text messages, Twitter, Facebook, social media. So
some of the kind of like older style communication methods haven't died yet. Sometimes you still need to do face-to-face. You still need to look at someone in the eye, shake their hands. And millennials still know how to do that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so at least.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure because, on my phone, I have 3 kids, 17, 15, and 7. So my 2 older ones, yelling upstairs doesn't work, right? I tried Facebook. They're not on Facebook anymore. Instagram, it's all pictures. I had to download Snapchat. And, I'm doing this whole texting, and then I got off it, and I came back, and it was all disappeared. I was like, what is this, right?
Right.
So, okay, well, I'm glad to know, though, that kind of the same old truths of shaking the hands, looking someone in the eye still work, right?
Definitely.
That's fantastic. Now, Rebecca, I was looking at your resume, which is really amazing, and congratulations for all of your work, not just at Microsoft, but just in the general community. I think it's really admirable. And I noticed something that you were named by the White House as a person to watch in the tech industry.
Under President Obama.
Oh, under President Obama's White House. Oh, okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification because I was like, wow, that's awesome. I was like, why, really? I mean, well, since you brought it up, any words of wisdom for the current occupant?
I would say that, leaving technology behind is a mistake. In terms of, I don't know if anybody's been following along with how, parts of, obviously, there's been legislation and budget cuts being passed, but also with that comes, some of the prior work and even prior work within technology. So the award I received was from the, CTO of the White House from, signed by President Obama. And I think that if we are not, moving forward with technology education skills, especially, as not only in New York City, but as a country, we're going to fall behind. Whether that's the economically, but also in terms of, I think technology is just a really valuable skill regardless of what profession people go into. And I think that the current administration could do definitely better in continuing to implement it and keep some of the things that we've established in place. So
you don't want to go backwards, right?
Yeah, so hoping that we can keep technology in there.
All right, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Now, Kevin, I really applaud your work, especially around ERGs at Freddie Mac. And Freddie Mac's such a respected company and does great things, particularly around home ownership and many things in the real estate business. Tell me about your work with the ERGs. And I know you're really high on this idea of reverse mentoring. Tell me what that is. Tell me what you do there, and tell me how it works.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I do a lot of work with our Asian and our Rising Leaders affinity groups, ERGs. Okay. With the Asian ERG, what we've actually started doing again this year is something called mentoring circles. So it's not your traditional one-to-one kind of interaction. It's one-to-many, 1 to 6. And that kind of pairing you're not just working with others. For example, I'm in IT. That group, those individual mentoring circles, they include members across the company. So there's kind of 2 value adds of mentoring circles that we've identified. One is the fact that those 6, 7 people in that circle are learning something from a respected leader within the company. But on the reverse side, that mentor is learning how to mentor, how to teach a younger group or even a less experienced group. It was actually interesting the other day. One of my supervisor is actually one of the mentors in those circles, and he came to me and asked me, how should I mentor? How should I mentor? Wow. Right? So it kind of gives you a different, the reverse mentoring, right? You're teaching the mentors how to mentor. So it goes both ways. No matter what kind of mentor relationship it is, the mentors aren't perfect. They're trying to learn as well. And with these mentoring circles, there's a diverse group of individuals within the circles, and then the manager can also learn from it. That's fantastic. And how widespread is it? Is it just within your Asian group, or has it gone to other? So it's each ERG group has their kind of own iteration of mentoring circles, but the way it's run is it's open to everyone. Okay. It's just sponsored by our ERG. That's fantastic. Rebecca, let me ask you a question. When I read your bio, you got a whole lot going on. You're Asian, right? Filipino, also Latina. And tell me about that and how that
those two cultures, which I think have some similarities, have some differences, how does that all bubble up and make you who you are? And I'll ask you this, how do you identify with maybe one versus the other, and how does it impact your life?
Yeah, so definitely. So my parents are first generation. I'm first generation here. My parents immigrated here. They actually settled in the Bronx initially, and then moved out to the suburbs. But for me, I think, as a millennial, I think that having a multifaceted identity or personal brand has really lent itself to my success in terms of being able to define my own success and what I wanted to do and make different career transitions. So I went from being, a programmer, engineer, developer to now program manager to, I've worn so many different hats. I co-founded a nonprofit, but I've done all these things because I'm passionate about so many different things and I'm not afraid to share it. I also have more Twitter followers than you. So.
Oh, you do? Not for long, because I'm going to have all these people following me now. But even then, it's probably not a third of what you have, right?
7,000?
Oh, okay. All righty. All right, you win.
But, sorry, to come back to my point, I think, being multicultural, being diverse, I feel like my joke was stolen earlier. I also come from a multi-religious family in terms of ours is more like, what do you have when you have a Mormon, a Protestant, a Catholic, a Buddhist, and a Jew and an atheist? Is you have Christmas, Hanukkah at the Garcias.
That's great.
And that's my family. Each of my sisters married into different family and different religions.
So holidays all around, right?
Yeah, the kids are really confused because they're like, "Why? So it's Hanukkah or it's Christmas because it's Hanukkah?" Like that one year when Hanukkah and week when Hanukkah and Christmas fall together. But yeah, so I think my background itself, it was hard to identify with one specific culture or another, and I still feel strongly about representing both cultures. So for me, that means being the only Latina in the room or being the only Asian woman in the room, and not being afraid to be the minority in the room. And I think that it's just a matter of showing up and right. being there. And
let's talk about that for a second, because I think what you just said is something that many of us maybe currently or earlier in our careers felt, right? Oh, I got to go in this meeting. I know I'm the only one like me. It could be a gender thing. It could be a generational thing. It could be a cultural thing. And yeah, you know what? I disagree with everything that's being said in this room. And now it's my turn to speak up or choose not to. Somehow I think you're one who speaks up. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that my ways of speaking up are a little different. I think in my own ways, I've decided to take action. I wasn't waiting for permission to start my nonprofit. I'm just sort of curious. Do you mind if I ask the audience a question?
Please.
So last year, we had about 1,200 youth that came through our nonprofit program throughout the greater New York City area. Can anybody guess what the budget was for 1,200 kids in the greater New York City area? Throw out any numbers. For all the kids. How much do you think? Any other numbers? 1,000? 0? Actually, I've had folks. I'm surprised. Normally the other responses I get is like 100,000.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So normally the response I get is 100,000, but I guess everybody knows millennials. Our budget was $10,000 or less.
Wow.
Yeah. And that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations for getting this done, though. I mean, it's amazing work on a shoestring budget, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's kind of different is I actually co-founded my nonprofit because I tweeted. I think that's going to sound silly, but there's CoderDojo chapters all across the globe. There's about 1,060 countries, and I tweeted at them, and I was like, "Hey, is there something like this in the New York City area?" They're like, "No, but you can start one." And so it's been 5 years. Yeah,
that's phenomenal. That's really, really great. Kevin, let's talk about when we talk about millennials in meetings or in the workforce. Talk about reverse mentoring here. How should Gen X and baby boomers, or even Gen Z who are following you guys, so when my son gets into the workforce, he's a Gen Z guy. How what's the best way to leverage millennials like yourself in the workforce?
I think, and I can't speak on behalf of all millennials, but one key thing that always seems to resonate is feeling connected.
Okay.
And there's kind of three tiers of feeling connected. There's being connected within the project you're working on or the team. There's being connected within your company, know what else is going on. So in IT, you're doing IT, but do you know what else is going on within the company? And then even beyond that, being connected to the industry.
Okay.
Some examples of how to feed into those things is being connected within your team. Kind of understand what task you're working on. My shredding paper example, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just counting how many boxes I could shred every single day.
Right.
And I was proud of it. Hey, I got 20 boxes today.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand how that fit into the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. Once you develop that understanding, your job becomes more meaningful.
Sure.
The second tier, so feeling connected within your workplace. So that's one thing that I find good with IT. The IT can be applied across the board. It's not just IT isolation from business. So for all work that you're doing, kind of relate to the business processes. I learned a lot about, I mentioned the legal examples. With compliance, you learn about privacy laws, payment card industry. Those are things that you may not need on the job, but they are definitely relevant. So whether you decide to stay in your job, in your position, in your company long term, or decide to move on, those are kind of the skills that you should retain and know that they're valuable.
So having that connection, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then the last tier was the industry, right? Attending conferences like this, forums, getting to meet folks outside of your company are great ways to kind of stay connected. One thing I can personally reflect on is when you get to the point where you can do your job with your eyes closed, you probably need to look at other opportunities within, other opportunities, period. That's how I really got involved with our ERG groups. Okay. So it's kind of in a sense, it's volunteer work within the company, working with different folks within the organization to plan guest speakers, speed networking, mentoring circles, partnerships with external firms for panel discussions.
Right.
So it's you kind of have to motivate yourself to go beyond what you're assigned. To just never get in the position where you're doing your job, eyes closed, get it done, and go home.
Right. It sounds really fulfilling, yeah?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think that's the key thing, right?
Yeah.
Fair to say millennials need that extra fulfillment beyond a paycheck? Yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So in a minute, I'm going to open it up to questions, which I know are out there. But before we go to that, Rebecca, what is one skill that, I know you don't speak for all millennials, but that you see, both of you maybe, as you work with millennials, that maybe millennials need to work on a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I would say one skill that millennials need to work on is, let's see, maybe a little bit more on critical thinking, I would say, in the sense that we're so used to seeing everything in small chunks. You know, we see tweets for news. We see the millennial generation is seeing Snapchat. They're seeing ads very quickly. And so maybe slowing down and stopping to think about the bigger picture is definitely one thing I've noticed in interns I've worked with is like, hey, let's take a step back and figure out our direction.
That's great. Thank you. So let's go to questions now. Are there any questions? We have our team of millennials here who are here to solve your professional development needs. This is a risk-free zone. No questions for our millennials right now? Please.
What do you see as the biggest issues in working with baby boomers and older people?
Me? What do I see? Well, I think working with older people is fantastic. I know. When I think about older folks, of which I include myself, they're seasoned, they're smart. No. Well, here's what I would say about folks like working with people like me. I'm a pain in the neck, let me tell you, all right? I can sometimes be impatient. No, seriously, because growing up at Accenture, where I spent 13 years, is very process oriented, right? Things have to be done a certain way. It's been tried and true for many, many years. Don't deviate from it. And I can see where that might get tiresome because, when you get new ideas from folks like yourself, I'm already in my head trying to throw that against the wall. And I'm hate to say it, mentally inclined to poke holes in it, maybe before giving it a chance. And that's not good. That's not healthy at all because you don't want to already filter something out before you give it a chance to shine, right? Yeah. So other than that, I'm totally great. Yeah, just so you know. Did I answer your question, though?
To jump.
I thought you were asking me.
For my turn.
To jump in on the other side of the spectrum, so I said critical thinking for millennials. I think on the other side of older folks, I think, is that the politically correct term?
It is what it is,
Seasoned veterans.
Nice.
Is being able to be open to trying things, even if it's in small iterations. I think that's kind of the middle ground and the compromise is, maybe this big grand idea isn't going to work because it's not going to fit through the process at this larger company that we're at, but let's try a pilot of it. Let's try something smaller. And then once we've got that proven success, start moving forward versus just sort of being like, that's not how things are done,
No, totally. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's two things I can think of. One is kind of the messaging, right? There's a big difference between, hey, go fill out the spreadsheet versus, hey, can you help us make sure that our financials are in order and we're on track to deliver such and such, right? There's a big difference. You're assigning the same task, but you're doing it differently. That kind of goes back to the point of making sure that the job is known to be meaningful, not just, hey, you're entering in data. The other thing is, I guess, back to the feeling connected concept, right? You have to make sure to help with the question asking, make folks understand why they're doing something, so that their jobs aren't just, I'm doing this thing off on my own and I'm done.
Sure. Okay. Please, right here.
Just one quick comment that I wanted to make.
Hold on, we want to capture everything. Here you go.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Me being on the cusp of being a millennial and a Generation X, one of the biggest misnomer is the fact that millennials, given how they behave, how they interact with social media, I feel like there's a reputation out there, right? They're known to be impatient. They're known to be social media addicts, right? They don't seem to have any filtering. But given the fact that this is going to be the largest generation, I think there's a two divide, right, of this generation. And it's very interesting if you look at the statistics, right? Half the generation is following that traditional route of what Generation X and the baby boomers have done, which is graduate, right, get a job, pay your dues, get married, buy a house.
I like that. No, stop there.
It's wrong. The other path is actually pursuing things to figure it out, right? And this generation is called the delayed generation, right? Whereas they're much later in getting their degree, much later leaving their parents' home, much later in kind of grasping the content. But I think all in all, I think what kind of changed the dynamics between the two generations is the proliferation of technology. And I think this generation embraced technology much more rapidly than the others, right? And because they've embraced it and they've welcomed the changes, they were able to adapt and take advantage of all the changes.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's the key point across all of them.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think also technology is advancing at such a rapid pace right now that you kind of have to learn the skill of adapting now. And so my biggest hope is that millennials, myself included, are using that as something for their careers, and whether that's figuring it out along the way. I think that challenging the idea of success, with technology, I think is amazing right now.
Great. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Technology, it's universal. It gets applied everywhere. No matter where you go, there's technology in one form or the other.
Right.
You can't remain current in the market without knowing something about technology. And whether it's as an end user using the technology or being ones to pioneer it within your organizations. If it doesn't exist in your company, it doesn't mean it won't ever exist, right? Sometimes you have to give it a little nudge to make it happen.
My mom still had people printing her emails for a while.
Oh my goodness.
She's like, can you fix this? And I was like, I can, but I don't want to do it because I want you to learn.
Oh, God.
He needs an iPhone 8 when it comes out this year.
Yeah, he'll come and shred all the paper at your house.
Oh, yeah, I'll take care of that for you.
All right. Well, look, speaking
20
of
boxes a day.
Yeah. He's really good at it. All right, we'll do one more question, please.
Hi, do you want your company to have a career path for you, or would you prefer to curate your own career?
Oh, great question. Great question.
I can start. A little bit of both. So I want to know that there is a career path, but I don't necessarily think, and I'm speaking for myself at least, having kind of a straight path isn't as meaningful as having a path and then multiple branches that you can explore. Right, so if you join as a developer and you know your path is you're always going to be doing programming, not so appealing as you can continue your development path, but then branch off as a lead or branch off as a manager, a people manager, managing projects that involve development. So having the options is important, just as important as having a career trajectory. Right, having some options out there.
Yeah, and I guess just to tack on to the end of that, I think having the option for things that are focused around skills, where it doesn't necessarily have to do with a specific title, but I had a really great manager who noticed what I was good at, and when I was at Squarespace, I shifted actually into HR, and so I worked under diversity as well. Because he noticed that I was passionate about it, and I didn't have an HR background, but I had a technology background that we could blend with HR. And so I really appreciated that he had noticed that and was able to advocate for me.
That's great. Well, Microsoft and Freddie Mac are very lucky to have you guys. So congratulations on everything you've done so far and everything you will do.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you all both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.